We had just come back from the ER. My wife, 7 months pregnant, had collapsed at the sink. Her blood pressure had spiked so high the nurses didn't waste time with paperwork. The words preeclampsia and emergency bed rest were being thrown around like confetti. For hours, I sat in that cold hospital room, praying. By some miracle, both she and the baby were okay. So when we finally pulled into our driveway, emotionally drained and just thankful to be home, we didn't expect a fresh slap in the face waiting for us. But there it was, an envelope fluttering on our porch. Final warning, grass violation, $29 fine. I didn't even get out of the car. I just sat there staring at it like it had personally insulted my ancestors. Because I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't about the grass. It never was. This was Cynthia, our neighborhood self-appointed HOA queen, declaring war. And she wasn't doing it with rules. She was doing it with violations, intimidation, and the kind of unhinged energy that could laminate a warning sign and call it law. We stepped inside the house, still in that fragile post-hospital days, until I noticed the backyard gate was cracked open. I ran out, and my stomach dropped. The lock on our shed had been broken. Boot prints tracked across the floor. Baby supplies were scattered like trash. The crib we just assembled, diapers, a sterilized bassinet. Everything tossed like someone had been looking for drugs. There was a muddy footprint on the baby blanket. My wife didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just placed a hand on her belly and went still. The cops came, took a report, but they didn't even pretend to take it seriously. If the HOA believed you were storing construction materials, one of them said, they might have thought. I cut him off. That's not lumber. That's a stroller. He just shrugged. And that's when I need to ask you something. Where are you watching from? And has your HOA ever crossed a line like this? Because this wasn't just a violation of privacy. It was a declaration. A warning shot. Only problem? They didn't know who my wife was. She works in counterterrorism. And Cynthia had just stepped on a live wire. That night, the house was silent. Not because we were exhausted, though we were, but because something inside my wife had shifted. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She was calculating. While I was pacing the kitchen, wondering if we should call a lawyer or file another police report, she was already on her laptop, hands moving fast, her focus razor sharp. I leaned over her shoulder. She was downloading every file from Cynthia's ridiculous HOA website, which, by the way, looked like it had been designed in 2004 with Comic Sans, low-res clip art, and a Donate Now button linked directly to Cynthia's personal PayPal. My wife didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. They're not registered with the state, she said flatly. They're impersonating a legal entity. Then she smiled small, cold, and terrifying the best way. They're done. The next morning, Cynthia strutted past our house with her yappy dog and oversized sunglasses like she was being hunted by paparazzi. She paused at the edge of our lawn, wrinkled her nose in theatrical disapproval, and pulled out her phone to snap a picture, probably for her next pastel-colored violation notice. I waved. She didn't wave back. My wife didn't even look up from her screen. She'd moved past fury and into something much more dangerous. Strategy. And then it got worse. Cynthia sent an email to the entire neighborhood listserv. Subject line, community alert, violator escalates. In it, she claimed we had refused to comply with multiple safety requests, accused us of staging a false police report, and even implied that my wife was mentally unstable due to hormonal imbalance. She signed it, in community safety, Cynthia B. That email? Huge mistake. My wife read it once. No reaction. Then she opened a new document and titled it Evidence Log. Screenshots, timestamps, IP traces, server headers. She tracked Cynthia's web host to a company previously used by overseas gambling sites. Within minutes, she had it all documented. You want help? I asked. She shook her head, eyes still scanning. Just keep the lawn exactly 2.5 inches tall, she said. I need them to feel safe. And 3 hours later, she looked up at me with that same subtle smirk. They just gave me probable cause. It started as a hiss. Our sprinkler system sputtered around midnight. Nothing unusual at first, but then came the groan, followed by a full flood of the side yard. Odd, considering we'd installed that system ourselves, trench by trench, and monitored the water flow meticulously. I went to the kitchen sink to rinse a glass. No pressure, not a drop. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I followed the piping outside, tracing it toward the buried well system we'd upgraded last spring. And what I found was sabotage, a jury-rigged extension hose, crudely spliced into our underground line, running stealthily beneath the fence. 2 properties over, into Cynthia's backyard, a backyard that, despite the drought warnings and brown patches everywhere else, looked suspiciously lush and green. My heart sank. She wasn't just sending fake fines and breaking into sheds. She was stealing our water. And here's where karma twisted the knife. See, 2 weeks prior, my wife had quietly registered our property as part of Federal Rural Infrastructure Pilot Program, one that protected utility connections from tampering or unauthorized access, which meant the moment Cynthia tapped into that line, she hadn't just broken a pipe. She had triggered a Department of Homeland Security jurisdictional violation, because my wife, if I haven't mentioned it clearly enough, works in counterterrorism. By the time I came back inside, still holding a photo of the splice hose and trying to wrap my head around the audacity, my wife was already typing. A new folder. Resource tampering. Exhibit A. She didn't say anything at first. Just kept working. Lips tight. Hands steady. Mind calculating every move like a chess master 3 turns ahead. And then the doorbell rang. Cynthia had arrived. Clipboard in hand. For a surprise compliance inspection. Oh, she had no idea the kind of tea she was about to be served. Cynthia knocked at exactly 2:01 p.m., clipboard in one hand, self-righteous smirk in the other. The knock wasn't loud, but it had that HOA sting to it. You know the kind. Sharp, condescending, like it came with fine already stapled to your soul. My wife opened the door, calm, pleasant, every inch the image of suburban grace. Cynthia didn't even pretend to ask for permission. This is a formal HOA compliance inspection, she declared. Your failure to respond to previous notices indicates escalating noncompliance. We'll be documenting for record-keeping purposes. And then, without an invitation, she stepped across our threshold. I opened my mouth to object, but my wife gently touched my arm. Her voice, warm and even, floated out like a lullaby with a hidden blade. It's okay. We have nothing to hide. That tone, that wasn't surrender. That was bait. And Cynthia, bless her laminated heart, walked right into it. She started her inspection in the living room. Though, of course, nothing in there violated the sacred code of shrubbery. She breezed past without a glance, nose already pointed toward the backyard like a heat-seeking missile. Every few steps, she'd scribble something on her clipboard or take a blurry photo on her off-brand Android, muttering nonsense like, "Still looks a bit aggressive," about our freshly mowed grass. I wanted to ask what lawn height qualified as passive, but again, my wife didn't flinch. She simply offered Cynthia a glass of lemon tea and followed behind like a gentle specter of doom. Then came the shed. Cynthia didn't acknowledge that she'd already broken into it. No apology, no hesitation. Just fake surprise, like a toddler playing detective. She peeked in with theatrical suspicion, like she expected to find narcotics stuffed inside a diaper box. That's when my wife leaned against the fence and, in the most casual voice, asked, "Would you like to see our permits for the foundation installation?" Cynthia froze mid-scribble. "Permits?" she asked. "For the concrete slab under the shed?" My wife replied, as if reading from a script, "It meets County Code 14.27 for auxiliary storage buildings." We filed digitally, but I'd be happy to email you a copy. Although technically, since you're not a registered municipal authority, I'm not required to share anything. Cynthia blinked, not just because of the information, but because my wife had just tucked 3 insults inside one perfectly legal sentence. Still, Cynthia tried to rally, took another useless photo and muttered, "We're revising our guidelines to include stricter language on visual obstructions." This shed may fall into violation under the new standards. My wife nodded pleasantly. Oh, are those new standards filed with the state HOA registry? Cynthia hesitated. They're in draft, internal policy, pending review. Translation: she made them up in her living room during reruns of Property Brothers. After the tour, Cynthia stood in our driveway and delivered what she clearly thought was an official-sounding decree. You'll receive a follow-up report within 7 business days. I suggest you make arrangements to address multiple areas of concern. Continued disregard will result in formal proceedings. Then she turned on her heel and marched off, her dog yipping behind her like a toy soldier on a vengeance mission. My wife, she didn't even watch her leave. She just turned, walked back inside, and opened her laptop. Time to begin digital disassembly. Once inside, my wife didn't speak. She didn't need to. She was already activating the second phase of her plan, a digital perimeter so tight, not even a rogue HOA president with a clipboard and a superiority complex could wiggle through. First, she installed 3 new security cameras around the property. Cleverly disguised, of course. One looked like a garden gnome. Another was tucked inside a hollowed-out birdhouse. The third, hidden in plain sight inside a solar light next to our mailbox. Then she activated a metadata tracker, a tool she'd once used during internal threat analysis training. From that moment on, every email sent from Cynthia's so-called HOA address would be quietly mirrored, logged, and time-stamped in a secure cloud drive marked CMW, case file. I asked her, half joking, what's the end game? She didn't even look up. Her voice was calm, surgical. Evidence, documentation, pattern of harassment. If she pushes one step further, we initiate a formal complaint with the State Consumer Protection Board, and if needed, a federal civil rights claim. She clicked, saved, backed it up to 2 locations. She's operating an unlicensed organization, impersonating legal authority, targeting a pregnant woman with discriminatory actions. I blinked. Got it. Then I grabbed a mower and trimmed the lawn to exactly 2.00 inches. We weren't giving Cynthia even a single blade of leverage. The plan was simple. Let her keep escalating. Let her dig her own grave. But as it turns out, Cynthia didn't like to wait. That same night, an email hit the neighborhood listserv. Subject line: Urgent Community Safety Alert. It accused us by name of threatening behavior, hoarding hazardous materials, and suggested my wife's unbalanced conduct might be due to medical complications. She just tried to weaponize my wife's pregnancy. That was a nuclear mistake. My wife didn't yell. She didn't storm around the house. She simply whispered. She just crossed the line. Then she opened a new tab and began filing a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office. Every screenshot, every IP address, every security camera timestamp. She included her federal security credentials and CC'd both the neighborhood listserv and Cynthia directly. The message was short, precise, and devastating. Cynthia, you have 48 hours to retract your defamatory statements, cease all unauthorized activity under your unregistered HOA, and formally acknowledge your unlawful entry onto our property. Failure to comply will result in legal action, civil and federal. I suggest you consult legal counsel. I watched her hit send. She didn't blink. And that was the exact moment I knew. Cynthia had no idea who she was dealing with. By the next morning, Cynthia's car was gone. Not long after, 3 of her so-called board members, yes, the fake HOA had a board, resigned via a group email that landed like a thunderclap across the neighborhood thread. One of them messaged us privately. I thought this was just a garden club. I didn't know she was breaking actual laws. Another added, she told us your wife was unemployed and unstable. I'm so sorry. But Cynthia, she didn't back down. If anything, she doubled down. That same evening, just when you'd think she'd lie low or lawyer up, she did the most Cynthia thing imaginable. She held an emergency HOA board meeting on her front lawn. No agenda, no minutes, no legal standing. Just folding chairs, decaf coffee, and a few of her most loyal cardigan-wearing lieutenants gathered like it was a suburban seance. She stood at the top of her porch like a defiant cult leader and gave what sounded like a delusional State of the Union, announcing new enforcement measures for persistent violators. Her new fake rule list: tiered penalty increases for repeat noncompliance, mandatory visual inspections for aesthetic violations, and the piece de resistance. Any homeowner who fails to attend HOA meetings automatically forfeits their right to dispute fines. It was tyranny, laminated, wrapped in Times New Roman. We didn't say a word. No rebuttals. No replies. Because we didn't need to. My wife had already filed an anonymous tip to a federal consumer rights watchdog. She attached screenshots of the fake bylaws, the shady website, the fabricated fees, and signed off with a chillingly simple note. This group is impersonating a legal authority, issuing fines under threat, and collecting personal data through unsecured means. There may be a broader pattern. She didn't sign her name. She didn't have to. 48 hours later, we got a reply from a.gov email address. Subject line: Inquiry, Glen Maple Homeowners Association, potential violations. We were ready to let justice do what justice does best. But Cynthia? She had one more bad idea left. 3 days later, Cynthia struck again, desperate, flailing, and louder than ever. We found the notice on our porch, folded under a decorative rock, like it was a medieval scroll announcing war, typed in full caps, full of typos, and soaked in bureaucratic drama. Notice of formal lien, escalating noncompliance fees, $213. It accused us of violating Yard Code 42A, reference a non-existent aesthetic nuisance policy, and even billed us with administrative costs of her uninvited inspection. She'd also included a $15 charge for verbal hostility. My wife read it once, sighed, and photographed it. She didn't rant, didn't fume, just calmly added it to her growing case folder. Karen Civil Violations, page 118. And then the real twist landed. That evening, Cynthia tried to log into her fake HOA website, the same one hosted on a shady server linked to expired sweepstakes scams. But instead of her pastel dashboard and donation button, she was met with a giant red banner. Account suspended, under review for terms violation. According to one very amused neighbor with a clear view of Cynthia's backyard, she spent the next 2 hours pacing in fuzzy slippers, yelling into her phone with phrases like free speech and community autonomy echoing across a cul-de-sac. Meanwhile, my wife forwarded the latest updates, complete with screenshots and site metadata, to the Department of Homeland Security's Oversight Office. There was now enough documented evidence to justify a federal inquiry, not just for impersonating legal authority, but for unsecured collection of homeowner data and potential fraud. And then, just as Cynthia's last defense collapsed, the FBI showed up. No sirens, no drama, just a quiet black SUV parked calmly in front of her house. 2 plainclothes agents, button-ups, badges, that unmistakable "we're here for business" walk. Cynthia answered the door, wearing what looked like gym clothes and overconfidence. That changed quickly. One agent entered. The other waited outside. Minutes later, a second vehicle arrived, marked DHS Cyber Enforcement Unit. They entered with a warrant and a laptop bag. Neighbors just happened to be watering plants, checking mail, pretending to adjust Halloween decorations in April. I stood on the porch with coffee in hand, watching Cynthia's empire collapse in real time. When the agents left, they carried a laptop, a few folders, a thumb drive. One of them nodded at us as they passed. Cynthia stood in the doorway, arms limp, blinking in the sunlight like someone who had just realized this was very, very real. And still, that wasn't the end. That evening, we thought maybe, just maybe, Cynthia had finally run out of delusion. No more emails, no patrols, no fake citations. For the first time in weeks, the neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. But peace, it doesn't stick around long when you're dealing with a woman who believes she was ordained by destiny to monitor grass height. The next morning, we found a letter in our mailbox, not typed, not from a lawyer, just handwritten in purple cursive ink, like a glittery ghost from a Victorian boarding school. It read, I hope you're happy. You've endangered the harmony of this neighborhood. I only ever wanted to keep things safe. Now everything is falling apart. You should be ashamed of yourselves. No signature. No return address. Just petty blame, wrapped in passive aggression and glitter pen calligraphy. My wife read it once, chuckled softly, and dropped it into the evidence folder without a single word. Because while Cynthia was still playing HOA-themed dress-up in her own head, the rest of the neighborhood was done. Neighbors began reaching out to us, quietly at first, then in groups. Apparently, we weren't the only ones she targeted. We were just the only ones who fought back. She had fined an elderly couple for leaving porch lights on too late, threatened a single mom with citations for multiple vehicles, even though one was a borrowed car, while hers was in the shop, told a decorated veteran his American flag was a visual disruption to aesthetic unity. They were all scared. They'd all paid. Until now. Now, they had screenshots, testimonies, and for the first time, hope, because the machine Cynthia built with clipboards and intimidation was collapsing. And it wasn't just a local story anymore. The county had opened an investigation. Her HOA registration? Suspended pending review. Her finances? Flagged for audit. And her website? Still very much offline. She may have signed off her letter hoping we'd feel ashamed. But the only thing we felt was momentum. When the official court hearing was scheduled, we almost didn't believe it. But there it was, Thursday afternoon. Community District Court, the same beige government building where people renew license plates and file for parking permits. It didn't look like a battleground, but oh, it was about to become one. Cynthia arrived first, wearing a sharp gray pantsuit, binder clutched to her chest like it contained divine revelation. She strutted through those glass doors like she was about to receive a medal for suburban excellence. My wife wore a soft cardigan over her maternity dress. No makeup, no entourage, just one slim briefcase and a USB stick. She didn't need theatrics. She had evidence. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with tired eyes and zero patience for drama, called the room to order and asked for opening statements. Cynthia launched into a speech so full of buzzwords it sounded like a rejected TED Talk. Neighborhood unity, aesthetic cohesion, morality decay, and the silent war against compliance. She accused us of hoarding, of aggression, of rejecting community harmony. She even said our lawn had become a symbol of neighborhood defiance. My wife sat there calmly, hands folded over her belly. No interruptions, no emotion, letting Cynthia bury herself. And then it was our turn. My wife stood, introduced herself, not just by name, but by federal title. Quietly, confidently, she handed the judge the USB. Inside, footage of the shed break-in, screenshots of every false violation notice, metadata logs from the fake HOA email account, records of funds funneling into Cynthia's personal PayPal, statements from neighbors, and copies of the state and federal complaints already in motion. Then came the knockout, Cynthia's official HOA registration filing, where she listed over 30 homes as members, included 3 forged names. We had affidavits from all of them denying involvement. The courtroom went silent. Even Cynthia's smug expression cracked. The judge leaned forward, tapped her pen against the desk, and said, "This matter appears to exceed the scope of a neighborhood dispute. I'm issuing a temporary suspension of the HOA registration pending further investigation. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential fraud and misrepresentation." Cynthia tried to object, but the judge didn't even let her finish. "If you speak again without being addressed, I will hold you in contempt." It was the first time I'd ever seen Cynthia sit down quietly. We walked out without saying a word to her. Back home, a small crowd of neighbors was gathered by our driveway. One elderly woman stepped forward and said, "Thank you. She's been terrorizing people for months." Another handed my wife a small bouquet, for the baby and for being a badass. Within a week, the story broke. Quietly at first, a blurb in the county newsletter, a mention on the township website. But around here, it was all anyone talked about. Unregistered HOA under investigation for fraud, harassment, and unauthorized data collection. Cynthia's name wasn't printed, but everyone knew, especially when her personal PayPal account, used to collect over $10,000 in made-up fines, was flagged by the IRS for undeclared income. She got a letter, then a summons, then a notice for audit. Her empire of fake bylaws and fear, gone. The HOA sign she'd proudly installed at the entrance to Glen Maple Drive, quietly removed by county order. The newsletter she used to send out on pastel stationery, canceled. Her inner circle of clipboard-carrying volunteers, vanished. Some of them even publicly apologized on the neighborhood Facebook group. Even her dog, who used to bark like a banshee every time someone dared walk their lawn, went silent. And Cynthia? She retreated behind closed blinds. No more porch patrols. No more dramatic exits. Occasionally, we'd see her walking her dog at night, sunglasses on, like the shadows might forget what she'd done. Meanwhile, we threw a garden party. Nothing fancy. A few folding chairs, lemonade, cookies, and a handmade sign over the gate that read, "No fine zone." One neighbor brought a cake that said, "R.I.P. HOA," in big red frosting letters. Not subtle, but perfect. My wife, glowing, finally relaxed, sat beneath a canopy, sipping tea and laughing softly with neighbors who had once feared even planting a sunflower. And then, a month later, our daughter was born. We named her Lily. Strong, healthy, loud enough to wake the block. Cynthia never sent a card, but she did receive one, certified, hand-delivered. A legal notice stating her request to reinstate the HOA had been permanently denied. Her actions were under ongoing civil review, and multiple neighbors had joined a class action suit against her for damages. We never heard from her again. Our lawn, trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches. Our shed, reinforced, secured. Our peace, hard-earned, well-defended. And my wife, still undefeated. So the next time someone breaks into a pregnant woman's shed over a $29 grass fine, they better pray she doesn't work in counterterrorism. If you made it this far, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And remember, some people build fences, others build cases. See you in the next story.